The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched high above Lisa Morgan's head. The walls were made of a strange blue metal that seemed to breathe with its own light. She stood in the center of a white circle, feeling very small. Around her, beings from 50 different worlds watched from their floating platforms. Some had scales, others had too many eyes. The Zarathi delegation floated highest of all, their bodies like living glass filled with swirling smoke. Lisa tried to stay calm. Her uniform felt tight around her throat. She was a lieutenant commander in Earth's space fleet trained to handle first contact situations. But this had gone wrong from the start. 3 days ago, she had been at a peace ceremony representing humanity. Everything had been going well until she noticed something terrible. The Zarathi were hiding slaves in their ship's lower holds. She had seen them through a window during the tour. Small, scared beings in chains. She had spoken up immediately. That was her mistake, according to the council. She had interrupted the Zarathi ambassador's speech to point out the slaves. She had shown everyone the video evidence from her helmet, camera. The ceremony had ended in chaos. Now she stood trial for disrupting galactic peace. The judge was a Vorian, a being that looked like a tall pile of rocks with eyes. Its voice sounded like grinding stone when it spoke. The universal translator, in Lisa's ear, turned the sounds into English. "Lisa Morgan of Earth," the judge said, "you have been found guilty of verbal contamination. You spoke without permission. You accused a council member species of crimes without following proper channels. You have damaged the peace we have worked centuries to build." Lisa wanted to argue. The slaves were real. She had proof. But her lawyer, a small furry being from Proxima, had told her to stay quiet now. Speaking would only make things worse. Captain Jack Torres watched from the human section of the gallery. His hands were clenched into fists. Lisa was his best communications officer. She was also right about the slaves. But being right didn't matter here. The council cared more about order than justice. The Zarathi ambassador moved forward. Its body clinked like wind chimes. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in everyone's minds. "The human has proven what we warned the council about. This species is too young, too emotional. They speak without thinking. Their words are weapons they cannot control." Lisa felt anger rise in her chest. She bit her tongue to keep from speaking. "The sentence must fit the crime," the judge continued. "Since you have misused your voice, you will lose it. You will wear a silencing collar for one complete solar rotation of your world. 365 of your Earth days." Guards moved toward Lisa. They were Ketran, huge beings with 4 arms each. One carried a metal collar that glowed, with a sick green light. Lisa took a step back, but there was nowhere to run. The white circle she stood in was actually a force field. She was trapped. "Please," she said, breaking her lawyer's advice. "The slaves need help. Someone has to speak. For them." "Silence," the judge commanded. "Your words mean nothing here." The guards reached her. Their hands were surprisingly gentle as they held her still. The collar was cold against her skin. She felt it click shut around her throat. For a moment, nothing happened. Then pain shot through her neck like lightning. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her vocal cords wouldn't work. Her throat wouldn't make any noise at all. The Zarathi ambassador's mental voice filled with satisfaction. "Let this be a lesson to all primitive species. The council maintains peace through order. Those who disturb order will face consequences." Lisa fell to her knees. Her hands went to the collar, trying to pull it off. It wouldn't budge. It felt like it had become part of her body. She looked up at Captain Torres, trying to call for help. Her mouth moved, but only silence came out. "The collar cannot be removed by any human technology," the judge explained. "Any attempt will trigger a lethal defense mechanism. The condemned will remain silent until her sentence is complete. She may return to her ship now." The force field disappeared. Lisa stood slowly, her legs shaking. 2 human Marines came down. To escort her, she recognized them. Sergeant Katie Robinson and Corporal Danny Chen. They looked at her with concern and anger mixed on their faces. As they walked past the Zarathi platform, the ambassador sent another mental message, this one, directed just at Lisa. Your species thinks words make you strong. Now you will learn how weak you really are without them. Lisa stopped walking. She turned to face the alien. She couldn't speak, but her eyes said everything. This wasn't over. The Zarathi had made a mistake. They had made an enemy of humanity, and they had no idea what humans could do when pushed. Back on the USS Liberty, the crew gathered in the meeting room. Lisa sat at the table, her hands flat on the metal surface. She kept touching her throat, feeling the alien collar that had stolen her voice. Everyone was talking at once, angry and scared. This is insane, Danny Chen said. He was the ship's chief engineer, a man who could fix anything, but he looked at the collar with defeat in his eyes. I've scanned it 20 times. The technology is beyond us. If we try to cut it off, it will kill her. There has to be something we can do, Katie Robinson insisted. She was young for a pilot, but one of the best. We can't just accept this. Captain Torres raised his hand for silence. It was ironic, Lisa thought. Everyone stopped talking to discuss the person who couldn't talk. The Galactic Council has spoken, Torres said. His voice was steady, but Lisa could see the rage behind his eyes. We have to follow their laws if Earth wants to stay in the galactic community, but that doesn't mean we do nothing. He looked at Lisa. You're still my communications officer. Losing your voice doesn't change that. We'll find other ways for you to communicate. The Zarathi think they've weakened us. Let's show them how wrong they are. Lisa nodded. She picked up a tablet and started typing. The words appeared on the room's main screen. The slaves are still on their ship. We need to help them. We will, Torres promised. But we'll be smart about it. The Zarathi want us to react with violence. That would give them an excuse to attack Earth. We need to be clever. Dr. Marcus Gray, the ship's medical officer, had been quiet until now. Lisa, I've been thinking. The collar stops your vocal cords, but there are other ways to communicate. Sign language, written words, even blinking in Morse code. We can adapt our systems to respond to these. Amy Sullivan, the ship's xenobiologist, added, I want to study the collar more. Not to remove it, but to understand it. The Zarathi gave us a weakness, but every weakness can become a strength if you're creative enough. Lisa felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Her crew wasn't giving up on her. They were already planning, already adapting. She typed again. The Zarathi said words are weapons. They're right. But they forgot that humans have many weapons. Over. The next few days, the Liberty stayed docked at the council station. They were supposed to leave immediately, but Torres filed paperwork delays. He wanted to give his crew time to prepare. Lisa spent every waking hour learning new ways to communicate. Katie taught her American Sign Language. Danny rigged the ship's computers to respond to gesture commands. Marcus created a system that could read her eye movements and turn them into words on screens throughout the ship. The Zarathi sent messages demanding the humans leave. Their ambassador was nervous. It hadn't expected the humans to stay so calm. It had expected rage, violence, something it could use against them. Instead, the humans were quiet, planning, learning. On the last day before they had to leave, Lisa stood at the observation window. She could see the Zarathi ship docked nearby. Somewhere inside, the slaves were still imprisoned. She couldn't speak for them with words anymore, but she was beginning to understand that words were just one way to speak. Actions could be louder, actions could say more. She touched the collar around her throat. It still hurt, a constant reminder of the council's justice. But pain could be a teacher too. The Zarathi had stolen her voice. They would learn that was their biggest mistake. 3 weeks had passed since the Liberty left the council station. Lisa Morgan sat in the engineering bay, surrounded by holographic displays. Her fingers moved through the air, pulling data streams together like weaving cloth. Danny Chen watched from across the room, amazed at what she was creating. Without words to slow her down, Lisa had found a new way of thinking. She saw patterns in the ship's communication systems that she had missed before. The quantum transmitters, the encryption protocols, the signal amplifiers. They all connected in ways she hadn't noticed when she was busy talking about them. Now, in her enforced silence, she could see the whole picture. She pulled up a new display and started drawing. Not words or numbers, but shapes that represented ideas. A circle for a transmitted message. A square for received data. Triangles for encryption keys. Lines showing how they all connected. It was a language made of pure concept, no words needed. Danny moved closer, studying her work. "That's brilliant," he said. "You're creating a visual, programming language. But it's more than that. It's like you're showing the soul of how communication works." Lisa nodded and added more shapes. She had been working on this for days without sleep. The collar around her throat was a constant ache, but she ignored it. She had discovered something important. The Zarathi had taken her voice, but they had freed her mind from the limits of spoken language. Katie Robinson entered the engineering bay, using her hands to sign as she spoke aloud. She had insisted everyone learn sign language to include Lisa in conversations. "Captain wants you on the bridge. We're getting strange readings from a nearby system." Lisa followed Katie through the ship's corridors. Crew members nodded to her as she passed. Some signed "Good morning" or "How are you?" They were all learning, adapting to their silent officer. It made Lisa feel less alone. On the bridge, Captain Torres stood before the main view screen. It showed a small mining colony on an asteroid. "Long-range sensors picked up a distress signal," he explained. "But it's weird. The signal cuts off every few minutes like someone keeps interrupting it." Lisa moved to the communication station. Her hands flew over the controls, adjusting frequencies and filters. Then she saw it. She grabbed a tablet and wrote quickly, showing it to Torres. "It's not being interrupted. There are two signals. One is asking for help. The other is telling everyone to stay away." "Two signals from the same place?" Torres asked. "That doesn't make sense." Lisa was already working. She isolated the two signals and put them on screen. One was in Galactic Standard, asking for emergency assistance. The other was in Zarathi, warning ships that the area was quarantined by Council authority. "The Zarathi are there," Katie said, reading the translation. "But why would the colonists call for help if the Council already sent someone?" Lisa knew. She could feel it in her chest. A certainty that came from not being distracted by the need to explain. She pulled up the colony's registration. It was a mining operation, privately owned by a small company from the Denari system. The Denari were not Council members. They were what the Council called a protected species, too primitive for membership, but under Council supervision. She typed rapidly, her words appearing on everyone's screens. "The Zarathi aren't there to help. Look at what the colony mines." Danny pulled up the data. "Trilithium crystals. They're used in... oh no. They're used in neural technology, like the collar." "The Zarathi are taking over the mine," Torres said, understanding immediately. "Using Council authority as cover, just like they hid the slaves." Lisa was already working on something new. She created a complex pattern on her screen, then sent it to Danny's station. He studied it for a moment, then his eyes went wide. "Lisa, this is insane. You want to use the Liberty's entire sensor array as a transmitter? That could burn out half our systems." Lisa signed quickly, Katie translating. "Not if we modulate the frequency using this pattern. It will create a focused beam that can punch through the Zarathi interference. We can talk to the colony without the Zarathi knowing." Torres considered for a moment. "Do it." The next hour was tense. Lisa worked with Danny to reconfigure the ship's systems. Without being able to speak, she had to show him everything through diagrams and mathematics. But somehow it was faster than explaining with words. Danny could see her intentions directly, without the confusion that sometimes came from verbal descriptions. When they were ready, Lisa initiated the connection. The view screen flickered, then showed a frightened Denari face. The being looked like a humanoid covered in brown fur with large eyes that blinked too often. "Who is this?" the Denari asked. "Please, we need help. The Zarathi came 3 days ago. They say we're under investigation for illegal mining, but we have all our permits. They've locked us in our quarters and taken control of our equipment." Torres stepped forward. "This is Captain Jack Torres of the Earthship Liberty. We're going to help you, but we need to be smart about it. The Zarathi are monitoring all standard communications. How many of them are there?" "6, the Denari replied. "They have weapons. They said if we resist, they'll report us to the Council for rebellion." Lisa was already planning. She pulled up the asteroid's schematics on her screen. The mining colony was built into the rock, with multiple levels connected by maintenance shafts. The Zarathi were probably in the control center on the upper level. The miners were locked in the residential section below. She drew a quick diagram and showed it to Torres. He understood immediately. "We can't attack directly. That would give the Zarathi exactly what they want, humans breaking council law, but accidents happen in mining colonies all the time." Lisa nodded and started typing commands. She was accessing the colony's environmental systems through their connection. The Zarathi hadn't noticed because she wasn't using any standard protocols. She was writing new ones in real time, creating a language of pure machine code that no translator could interpret. "What's she doing?" Katie asked, watching Lisa work. "She's being brilliant," Danny said with awe in his voice. "She's not hacking their systems. She's talking to them in a way the Zarathi can't understand. It's like she's speaking directly to the machines." Lisa found what she was looking for. The colony's artificial gravity generators were old, prone to fluctuations. A small adjustment to their frequency would create a harmonic resonance with the asteroid's metal ore. It would feel like an earthquake, but only in certain sections. She showed her plan to Torres. He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him since her trial. "Do it." Lisa's fingers danced over the controls. In the colony, alarms started, blaring. The Zarathi in the control center suddenly found themselves thrown against walls as the gravity shifted wildly, but in the residential section where the miners were locked up, the gravity remained stable. Lisa had isolated them from the effect. "Emergency locks disengaging," the Denari reported, hope in his voice. "The safety protocols are releasing all doors. We can get out." "Get to your emergency shuttles," Torres commanded. "Leave everything behind. Just get your people to safety." On the screen, they could see the chaos Lisa had created. The Zarathi were struggling to maintain their footing as the gravity continued to fluctuate. Their glass-like bodies were more fragile than they appeared. 2 of them had already cracked from impacting the walls. Within minutes, 3 shuttles launched from the asteroid, carrying all 42 miners to safety. The Liberty moved to intercept them, bringing them aboard. The Zarathi, still dealing with the gravity crisis, couldn't stop them. When the last miner was safe, Lisa finally stopped the gravity fluctuations. The Zarathi would recover, but they would find an empty colony and no evidence of outside interference. The gravity generators would show only a natural malfunction, the kind that happened in old equipment all the time. "The Zarathi are sending a message," Marcus reported from his station. "They're demanding to know what we did." "Send them this reply," Torres said. "We noticed their distress signal about gravity fluctuations and moved to assist with refugee evacuation, as required by Council humanitarian protocols. We're happy to file a full report with the Council about the dangerous conditions at the Yo mining colony that the Zarathi failed to prevent." Lisa felt satisfaction warm her chest. They had beaten the Zarathi at their own game, using Council rules against them. But more importantly, she had discovered something. Without her voice, she had found new ways to communicate. With machines, with mathematics, with pure ideas that needed no translation. That night, the Liberty's mess hall was full of celebration. The rescued miners were sharing their food and stories with the human crew. Lisa sat at a table with her closest friends, watching everyone talk and laugh. She couldn't join the conversations the same way, but Katie made sure to sign everything for her, and Danny had rigged a screen at their table that displayed her typed responses instantly. One of the elder Denari approached their table. He was older than the others, his fur streaked with gray. He sat down next to Lisa and pulled out something from his pocket. It was a small crystal, glowing with soft blue light. "This is from our mine," he said, but he wasn't looking at Lisa when he spoke. He was looking at the collar around her throat. We know what the Zerathi did to you. Word spreads, even to small colonies. You lost your voice defending others. Lisa Morgan hadn't slept properly in 3 days. She sat in the Liberty's science lab surrounded by equipment she had borrowed, stolen, or built herself. The collar around her throat hummed with a frequency only she could feel. 3 months of wearing it had taught her to notice things others missed. The humming changed when she was near certain electronics. It grew stronger when she was emotional. And lately it had been doing something new. Amy Sullivan, the ship's xenobiologist, worked beside her. They had become close over the past months, united by their determination to understand the collar. Amy was one of the few people who didn't treat Lisa differently because of her silence. She simply accepted it and found ways to work around it. "Look at this," Amy said, pointing to a scanner display. "Every time you think about speaking, even though no sound comes out, the collar sends out a pulse. It's transmitting something." Lisa nodded. She had suspected this for weeks. She typed on her tablet, the words appearing on Amy's screen. "It's not just blocking my voice, it's stealing it." Amy frowned, adjusting the scanner. "What do you mean, stealing?" Lisa stood and walked to the whiteboard she had installed in the lab. She drew a diagram of a human throat, then added the collar. With quick strokes, she showed energy patterns flowing from the vocal cords into the device. Then she drew those patterns being transmitted away, like radio waves. "They're recording your unspoken words?" Amy asked, her voice rising with alarm. "But why?" Lisa had a theory. She had been developing it for days, putting pieces together like a puzzle. She pulled up a star chart on the main screen, marking the location of every incident involving the Zerathi and other species over the past year. Mining colonies taken over, trade disputes that ended with the Zerathi winning, diplomatic negotiations, where the Zerathi somehow knew exactly what to say. She drew lines connecting the events, creating a web of connections. At the center, she placed the Zerathi homeworld. Then she added one more piece of data, the transmission vectors from her collar. They all pointed to the same location. Amy gasped. "They're not just punishing you. They're studying human communication. Learning how we think by analyzing what you try to say." Lisa nodded and typed quickly. "Not just me. Remember the council records? 17 beings from different species have worn these collars in the past 5 years, all for speaking against the Zerathi." She pulled up the records she had found, hacking into the council's database using her new visual programming language. The Zerathi had been systematically silencing critics from younger species that might pose a threat to their power, and each collar was transmitting constantly back to their homeworld. "They're building a translation matrix," Amy breathed. "Not just for languages, but for thoughts. If they can decode how each species forms words in their minds, they could predict what we're going to say before we say it. They could counter any argument, win any negotiation." Lisa typed one word. "Invasion." Amy's face went pale. "They're preparing to control the galaxy through perfect communication. If you know exactly what someone is going to say, you can manipulate them completely." Lisa moved back to her equipment. She had built a receiver that could intercept the collar's transmissions. For weeks, she had been recording everything it sent. Now she started playing with the data, transforming it into visual patterns. What she saw made her stomach turn. The collar wasn't just recording her attempted speech, it was mapping her entire linguistic cortex. Every connection between thought and word, every neural pathway involved in communication. The Zerathi were downloading the essence of human language directly from her brain. But Lisa had discovered something else. She typed quickly, her fingers flying over the tablet. "I've been feeding them false data." Amy looked confused. "How? You can't control." "What you think?" Lisa smiled, the first real smile Amy had seen from her in weeks. She pulled up another display, showing her brain activity over the past month. At first, the patterns looked random. Then Amy saw it. Hidden in the noise of normal thought, Lisa had been creating deliberate patterns. She had been thinking in her visual language, the one she had created while simultaneously forcing her vocal cords to attempt different words. "You've been lying to the collar," Amy said with awe. "Thinking one thing while your throat tries to say another." Lisa nodded and showed Amy what she had been transmitting. False information about Earth's defenses, wrong coordinates for human colonies, incorrect translations of critical military terms. For a month, she had been poisoning the Zarathi's database with carefully crafted misinformation. Captain Torres needed to know about this immediately. Lisa and Amy rushed to his quarters, where they found him studying reports from Earth. The political situation was getting tense. The Zarathi had been pushing for more influence in the Council, claiming that younger species like humanity needed more supervision. When Torres saw what Lisa had discovered, his face darkened with anger. Those bastards. They're using the justice system as a weapon development program. Lisa typed rapidly. We need to warn Earth, but any transmission we send could be intercepted. The Zarathi might already be decoding our quantum encryption using the data from my collar. Then we don't transmit, Torres said. We go back. How long would it take to reach Earth at maximum speed? 3 weeks, Katie Robinson answered. She had just entered the room, having been summoned by Torres. But the Zarathi have ships patrolling the border. They've been watching human vessels closely since the mining colony incident. Lisa had an idea. She moved to Torres's desk and pulled up a tactical display. She drew a route that looked insane at first glance. It went through 3 nebulae and skirted 2 black holes. It would take twice as long as the direct route. Danny Chen studied the path. That's suicide. The radiation alone would cook us. Lisa shook her head and added more details to the display. She showed how they could use the radiation to mask their signature, how the gravitational fields would hide them from long-range sensors. It was dangerous, but it was invisible. She's right, Marcus Gray said, checking the medical implications. We'd need to boost our radiation meds, but we could survive it, and no one would expect us to take that route. It's too crazy. Torres made his decision. We do it. Amy, can you and Lisa figure out how to block the collar's transmissions without triggering its defenses? Amy nodded. We've been working on that. We can't stop it completely, but we can muddy the signal, make it look like interference from the radiation. Over the next 2 days, the crew prepared for the dangerous journey. Lisa worked 18-hour shifts, creating false data streams to feed through her collar. She thought about surrender, about Earth giving up, about humanity being weak. Every lie hurt to think, but she forced herself to do it. The journey through the first nebula was hell. The ship shook constantly from particle impacts. The lights flickered as the radiation played havoc with their systems. Half the crew was sick from the medication side effects. But they pushed through. Lisa spent the time studying everything she had learned about the Zarathi. She found patterns in their behavior, weaknesses in their strategy. They relied too heavily on their ability to predict and manipulate. They had become lazy, expecting other species to communicate in predictable ways. In the second nebula, they encountered something unexpected. A ship, heavily damaged and drifting. It wasn't human, but it wasn't Zarathi either. Katie identified it as Yilin, a species that had gone silent 50 years ago after a conflict with the Council. Torres ordered a boarding party. What they found inside changed everything. The ship's database was still partially functional. It contained records from the Yilin civilization, including their interactions with the Zarathi. The Yilin had discovered the same thing Lisa had. The Zarathi had been stealing voices, stealing languages for decades. The Yilin had tried to warn the Council, but they had been silenced, not just individually, but as an entire species. Lisa found references to something called the Master Archive. It was on the Zarathi homeworld, a massive database containing the stolen linguistic patterns of hundreds of species. With it, the Zarathi could predict and manipulate any conversation, any negotiation, any conflict that involved words. But the Yilin had found a weakness. The archive couldn't process nonverbal communication. Species that communicated through color changes, pheromones, or pure mathematics were immune to its predictions. That's why the Zarathi pushed so hard for universal translators for standard verbal protocols. They needed everyone to communicate in ways they could steal and analyze. Lisa felt hope rising in her chest. Humanity had something the Zarathi hadn't expected. They had her. She had spent 3 months learning to communicate without words, creating new languages that existed outside of verbal expression. She had been building humanity's immunity without even knowing it. As they approached the third nebula, disaster struck. A Zerathi patrol ship had been hiding in the radiation shadow of a dead star. They couldn't run. The Liberty was too damaged from the journey to fight. The Zerathi commander appeared on their view screen. Its crystalline form pulsed with authority. "Earth vessel, you are in violation of navigation protocols. Prepare to be boarded." Taurus stood firm. "We're experiencing navigation failure due to radiation exposure. We're trying to reach Earth for repairs." The Liberty drifted behind the moon, hidden from the Zerathi fleet surrounding Earth. Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge, watching 30 enemy ships position themselves around her home. The collar around her throat felt heavier than ever, but her mind was sharp and clear. She had spent the last 6 hours working with Danny Chen and Katie Robinson to establish a secret connection with Earth's defense fleet. Admiral Paul Martinez appeared on their secure channel, his face grim. "Taurus, thank God you made it. The Zerathi showed up 3 days ago. They claim Earth has violated 17 Council regulations. They're demanding our surrender." "It's a lie," Taurus replied quickly. Lisa discovered their real plan. They've been stealing linguistic data from species across the galaxy. They know exactly what we're going to say before we say it. Martinez frowned. "That explains why every negotiation has failed. They counter every argument perfectly. They even quoted our own military doctrines back to us." Lisa stepped forward and began typing rapidly. Her words appeared on Martinez's screen. "I can teach you to fight them, but everyone needs to follow my lead exactly. No verbal commands, no radio chatter, complete silence." "How can we coordinate a battle without communication?" Martinez asked. Lisa had been preparing for this question. She activated a program she had written during their journey home. Suddenly, every screen in the Earth fleet displayed a simple geometric shape. A blue circle appeared, then morphed into a triangle, then split into 3 squares. Each transformation meant something different. "Attack, defend, regroup." "Visual commands," Martinez said, understanding dawning on his face. "The Zerathi can't predict what we don't say." Lisa nodded and typed more instructions. "I've been feeding them false data through my collar for months. They think they know our capabilities. They're wrong. Trust me." The Admiral studied Lisa for a long moment. She stood there, silent but radiating confidence. 365 days of wearing the collar had changed her. She had become something the Zerathi never expected, a human who had transcended the need for words. "All ships," Martinez commanded, "switch to silent running. Lieutenant Commander Morgan is taking tactical control. Follow her visual signals." "Exactly." Across Earth's fleet, 200 ships went dark. No radio chatter, no engine communications. Even the internal comm systems were shut down. Crews worked in silence, using hand signals and light patterns to coordinate. It was like the entire fleet had become one organism, moving with shared purpose. The Zerathi commander sent another demand for surrender. When no response came, it sent a telepathic message that reached every human mind. "Your silence means nothing. We have studied your language for months. We know how you think." Lisa smiled. They thought they knew human language from studying her stolen voice. But she had been lying to them, feeding them false patterns. More importantly, she had discovered something about humanity that even humans hadn't fully understood. They were adaptable in ways other species couldn't imagine. She initiated her battle plan. On every human ship, a simple image appeared. A spiral, rotating clockwise. The fleet began to move in perfect synchronization, forming a massive spiral, pattern around Earth. It looked like chaos to the Zerathi, but it was actually a complex mathematical formation Lisa had designed. The Zerathi ships tried to respond, but their commanders were confused. Their translation systems were screaming warnings about human attack patterns that didn't match what they were seeing. The false data Lisa had fed them was corrupting their predictions. Then Lisa triggered Phase 2. The spiral reversed direction. In perfect silence, 200 human ships changed course simultaneously. No orders were given, no signals were sent. They moved like a flock of birds, following visual cues that the Zarathi couldn't intercept or interpret. The Zarathi commander's telepathic voice filled with frustration. "Speak! Negotiate! You cannot win through silence." Lisa's response was to create a new pattern on the screens. A flower blooming. The human fleet spread out, each ship taking a precise position that looked random, but was actually calculated to create overlapping fields of fire. When Lisa drew a single line across her screen, every human ship fired at once. The Zarathi shields held, but barely. They had expected human weapons to behave according to the patterns in their database. But Lisa had taught the fleet to modify their weapon signatures, making them appear weaker than they were. The Zarathi had prepared for the wrong threat. On Au, the Liberty's bridge, the crew watched in awe as Lisa conducted the battle like a symphony. Her hands moved through the air, creating visual commands that traveled instantly to every ship. Katie had connected Lisa's gesture interface to the fleet's visual system. Every movement of her fingers became an order that 200 ships followed perfectly. "Their formation is breaking," Danny reported, whispering despite the communication. Blackout. Old habits died hard. Lisa could see it too. The Zarathi were used to enemies who talked, who threatened, who negotiated even during battle. The complete silence of the human fleet was destroying their confidence. They couldn't predict what they couldn't hear, but the Zarathi still had superior technology. Their weapons were more powerful, their shields stronger. In a straight fight, humanity would lose. Lisa knew this. That's why she had planned something else. She pulled up a new display and drew a specific pattern. It was the visual language she had taught the rescued Denari miners, the one that had spread to other species. The Liberty had encountered. Unknown to the Zarathi, Lisa had been building a silent alliance for months. Suddenly, new ships appeared from behind Jupiter. 50 Denari vessels, small but fast. They moved in perfect coordination with the human fleet, following Lisa's visual commands. They had been practicing in secret, learning to fight without words. The Zarathi commander's telepathic voice turned to panic. "How are you coordinating with them? We detect no communications." More ships emerged from hiding. 20 Yilin vessels, thought to be extinct, had survived in secret. They too followed Lisa's silent symphony. Then came the Ketran, the four-armed beings who had once served as council guards. They had learned of the Zarathi's deception and joined the silent rebellion. Lisa stood at the center of it all, a conductor leading an orchestra of war. Her collar prevented her from speaking, but she had become the voice of 100 species who had been silenced or threatened by the Zarathi. Each gesture she made rippled across the Allied fleet, creating movements that looked like chaos but were actually perfect coordination. The Zarathi tried to adapt. They started using visual signals of their own. But they were thinking in words, translating verbal commands into visual ones. Lisa was thinking in pure concept, in mathematical relationships that existed beyond language. Her allies followed not because they understood her words, but because they understood her intent. When Lisa raised both hands and brought them together, the entire Allied fleet converged on a single point. 300 ships from dozen species, all moving in perfect silence. The Zarathi flagship found itself at the center of a sphere of enemies, each one positioned at the exact angle needed to overwhelm its shields. But Lisa didn't give the order to fire. Instead, she did something unexpected. She created a new image on every screen in the battle. It was the Zarathi symbol for peace, but modified. She had added elements from every species present, creating a hybrid symbol that meant unity without words. The message was clear: surrender, or be destroyed. The Zarathi commander tried one last gambit. It sent a focused telepathic assault directly at Lisa, trying to break through her mental defenses and force her to speak. If she gave even one verbal command, the Zarathi systems could analyze it and predict the fleet's next moves. Lisa felt the pressure in her mind like crushing weight. The collar around her throat burned as it resonated with the psychic attack. For a moment she almost broke, almost opened her mouth to scream. Then she felt something else. The crystal the Denari elder had given her grew warm in her pocket. Through it, she felt the emotions of every allied being in the fleet. Their trust, their hope, their determination to never be silenced again. She pulled out the crystal and held it high. It blazed with blue light, visible even through the Liberty's view screen. The light spread from ship to ship, each vessel's crew adding their own emotional energy to the resonance. It became a wave of pure feeling that washed over the Zarathi fleet. The Zarathi, beings of crystalline structure, began to resonate with the emotional frequency. They couldn't block it because it wasn't communication in any form they understood. It was raw humanity, raw emotion from dozen species united in their refusal to be controlled. One by one, the Zarathi ships powered down, their weapons. Their commander's form cracked and reformed, its structure fundamentally changed by the experience. When it finally sent another telepathic message, it was different, smaller, uncertain. We cannot predict you. We cannot control what we cannot understand. Lisa typed a response that appeared on every screen in both fleets. You stole our voices, but voices are just one way to speak. We found others. We found unity in silence. Admiral Martinez appeared on the Liberty's screen. He was trying not to smile, maintaining military discipline, but Lisa could see the joy in his eyes. The Zarathi fleet is requesting terms. They want to negotiate surrender. Lisa. The Galactic Council chamber looked different now. Lisa Morgan noticed it immediately as she walked through the massive doors. The platforms where different species sat were no longer arranged in a hierarchy. They formed a circle, each delegation, at the same level. The Zarathi platform, once the highest, now sat empty. 2 months had passed since the battle at Earth. The collar around Lisa's throat was still active, still stealing her voice. But she walked with confidence, surrounded by representatives from Earth and the dozen species that had joined the silent revolution. Captain Torres walked beside her, along with Katie Robinson and Danny Chen. They had all been called to testify about the Zarathi's crimes. The Vorian judge, the same being of living rock who had sentenced Lisa a year ago, looked uncomfortable. Its grinding voice filled the chamber. The council has reviewed the evidence. The Zarathi's systematic theft of linguistic data from member species violates our most fundamental laws. Lisa stepped forward into the white circle where she had been sentenced. But this time, she wasn't alone. Representatives from the Denari, Yilan, Ketran, and 9 other species stood with her. They had all been silenced in different ways by the Zarathi. Now they stood together, united in their silence. The judge continued. The council offers its apologies to all affected species. The Zarathi have been stripped of their council membership. Their master archive has been destroyed and all stolen linguistic data has been returned. It was a victory, but Lisa wasn't satisfied. She pulled out her tablet and typed. Her words appeared on the chamber's main screen for all to see. Words are not enough. The council allowed this to happen. You prioritized order over justice. How many voices were stolen while you looked away? Murmurs rippled through the chamber. No one had ever challenged the council so directly. But Lisa had earned the right through her suffering and her triumph. New figure floated forward. It was a Zephrani, a species of energy beings that looked like controlled lightning in humanoid form. They were one of the oldest council members, respected by all. You are correct, Lisa Morgan of Earth. We failed. We valued peace through silence rather than peace through justice. What do you propose? Lisa had been preparing for this moment. She typed quickly, her message appearing in multiple languages simultaneously. Create a new communication protocol, one that cannot be stolen or manipulated. I've spent a year developing it. A language of action, emotion, and intent that exists beyond words. She activated a holographic display and began to demonstrate. Using her hands, her body, and the crystal the Denari had given her, she created a symphony of meaning that every species present could understand. It wasn't translation. It was direct understanding, being to being, without the filter of language. The chamber fell silent as species that had never truly understood each other suddenly connected. The insectoid Vrix, who communicated through pheromones, finally understood the musical language of the aquatic Melodians. The telepathic Syrians could finally share concepts with the mathematical geometrics. "This is impossible," the Vorian judge said, but its tone held wonder rather than disbelief. "You've created universal understanding without universal language," Lisa typed her response. "The Zerathi showed us our weakness, dependence on words that could be stolen and manipulated. So I found another way, a way that brings us together rather than dividing us. The Zafrani energy being pulsed with what might have been approval. The Council votes to adopt this new protocol. But there is another matter. Your sentence, Lisa Morgan, you still have 60 days remaining on your collar. However, given the circumstances, we can remove it immediately." Lisa stood still for a long moment. Everyone watched her, waiting for her response. She raised her hands and began to sign in her visual language. Katie translated for those who hadn't learned it yet. "No," Katie said, her voice carrying Lisa's words. "Let me finish the sentence. Let the collar remain as a reminder of what happens when we silence others. When it falls away naturally, it will mean more." The judge started to protest, but Lisa wasn't finished. She continued signing and Katie continued translating. "But I have conditions. Every species that has been silenced gets a permanent voice in the council. No more hierarchy. No more determining who is advanced enough to speak. Every voice matters." The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some species supported Lisa's proposal. Others, mostly the older members, resisted. But the alliance Lisa had built during the battle held firm. One by one, species stood with humanity, refusing to participate in the council unless it reformed. Finally, the Zafrani called for order. "We vote. All in favor of the Morgan Protocol?" The response was overwhelming. 3/4 of the council voted yes. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. The old order had fallen. A new age of communication had begun. As the session ended, beings from across the galaxy approached Lisa. They didn't speak to her in words. Instead, they used her new language, sharing emotions and concepts directly. She felt their gratitude, their hope, their determination to never be silenced again. That night, the Liberty hosted a celebration. The mess hall was packed with beings from dozens of worlds. Music played, but no one spoke. They had learned the power of silence, the strength in actions rather than words. Lisa sat at the center of it all, teaching her visual language to anyone who wanted to learn. Amy Sullivan sat beside her, working on a device she had been building for weeks. "I've figured out how to replicate the crystal's resonance," she said quietly. "We can mass-produce them. Every being in the galaxy could have the ability to share emotions directly." Lisa nodded and typed her response. "Not to replace language, to supplement it, to make sure no one can ever steal our ability to communicate again." Days turned into weeks. Lisa continued wearing the collar, even though the council had officially pardoned her. She had become a symbol. The human who had been silenced but refused to be quiet. The one who had found strength in limitation. She traveled to different worlds, teaching her visual language and the emotional resonance technique. Each species adapted it to their own needs. The Vrix added chemical markers. The Melodians incorporated musical harmonies. The geometrics created mathematical variations. The language evolved, becoming richer with each culture that embraced it. On the Denari homeworld, she was welcomed as a hero. The elder who had given her the crystal performed a ceremony, officially adopting her into their clan. "You gave us our voice back," he said through the crystal's resonance. "Not with words, but with courage." On the hidden Yilin colony, survivors of the species thought extinct came out of hiding. They had preserved their culture in silence for 50 years, afraid to speak lest the Zerathi find them. Now they sang for the first time in generations, their voices joining with their visual language in a harmony that brought tears to Lisa's eyes. Finally, the day came. Day 365. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Liberty, surrounded by her crew. Admiral Martinez was there, along with representatives from the Allied fleet. They had gathered to witness the moment. The collar's green glow flickered. Its grip on Lisa's throat loosened. With a soft click, it fell away. Clattering to the floor, Lisa touched her throat, feeling the bare skin for the first time in a year. The marks from the collar would fade, but the lessons would remain. Everyone waited. The chamber was silent, all eyes on Lisa. She opened her mouth, and for a moment, no sound came. Her vocal cords had been dormant for so long. Then, slowly, quietly, she began to hum. It was the same melody she had hummed in the council chamber months ago. A simple human tune that needed no translation. One by one, others joined. Her, humans first, then the Denari, then the Yilin. Soon the entire room was humming together, their voices creating a harmony that transcended species. When the humming faded, Lisa spoke her first words in a year. Her voice was rough, unused, but strong. "Thank you for hearing me when I couldn't speak." Captain Torres stepped forward. "Lisa, the Council has offered you a position, ambassador of the new communication protocol. You'd travel the galaxy, teaching and learning, making sure no voice is ever silenced again." Lisa looked at the collar on the floor, then at the faces around her. Humans and aliens, all united by shared experience. She thought about the year of silence, the pain and isolation, but also the incredible discovery that had come from it. "I accept," she said. Then she switched to her visual language, her hands painting meaning in the air. "But I'll teach in silence as much as speech. The Zarathi stole my voice thinking it would weaken me. Instead, I learned that humanity's greatest strength isn't in what we say, but in what we do. Our actions speak louder than words ever could." She picked up the collar from the floor. It was dead now, just metal and circuits, but she didn't throw it away. Instead, she had it mounted in the Liberty's museum section, along with a plaque that read in both words and visual language. They stole her voice, so she let her actions speak instead. In forcing one human to be silent, they taught humanity how to speak in ways that could never be silenced again. Years later, when historians wrote about the revolution that changed the galaxy, they would note that it began not with a shout or a declaration, but with the silence of one woman who refused to be truly silenced. Lisa,